Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio Network, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. Folks, this is the month of May, as you all know, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I have a special guest today. But before I introduce my guest, I want to encourage everyone, if you are struggling with mental health care issues, please consult your primary care doctor in your area for mental health referrals. It is okay to seek support. I do, and I am not ashamed that I do see someone. And I highly recommend counseling just to help whatever struggle you're facing right now. And if you are in the U.S., please call 988 if you are in crisis. And as always, refer to your primary care doctor about any mental health or medical concerns. Well, with me today, it's so timely. With me today is Tammy Smith, who is a licensed clinical social worker in Teaneck, New Jersey. I'm so happy when I have someone from New Jersey on the show. Tammy is an advanced candidate at the 5-year postgraduate training program in psychoanalysis at New Jersey Institute for Psychoanalysis. She's trained in rational emotive behavioral therapy through the Albert Ellis Institute in New York City, sensory motor therapy at Pat Ogden's Sensory Motor Psychotherapy Institute, body-focused repetitive behavior through the TLC Foundation, and complicated, can't read my handwriting, prolonged grief through Columbia University. Wow. Well, I would say that Tammy Smith is an expert in her field, and she also has Tammy Smith Counseling located in New Jersey. So if you are in New Jersey and you are hearing this, the link to Tammy Smith's business will be in the blog. And I want to welcome Tammy Smith to Chatting with Betsy. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here today.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on. Tammy, I have to say this. I'm 67, and back in the 70s, 1974, when I first went to a social worker for depression, it was not talked about back then. It was actually, I was shamed for going for help. And I'm so glad that the tide is turning, and I think it's turned since COVID, when mental health became at the forefront. But I know there's still stigmas, and that's what we're going to address today. Could you tell us about, in your opinion, as a professional, what stigmas are you still seeing with mental health care issues?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring that up. We have made so many strides in mental health. It's amazing. I live here, like you said, in New Jersey, and we now have Stigma Free, which is a movement that was started. Actually, Mary Ann Uzi helped spearhead it in Paramus, was the first town that became Stigma Free, and then every other town kind of hopped on board. And we have signs that are on streets. We have hospitals. We have schools that have designated themselves as stigma-free buildings and institutions, which are trying to promote this idea that it's okay to struggle with mental health, it's okay to talk about it, and more importantly, to point people to the appropriate resources so they can get the much help that they need. What we're still seeing, though, myself particularly as a therapist, is workplace. It's still a little hard for people to say to their boss, their supervisors, I'm having a rough day, I need a quote-unquote mental health day. A lot of organizations promote it. They put out newsletters. they kind of encourage it, but when it comes right down to it, I have people that come to see me that say they still don't often feel comfortable coming out directly and saying it. So they'll resort to, I have a headache, my kid is sick, the other excuses that have become more acceptable to use at work. So I'd really like to see being able to comfortably disclose at work is an area I think we're still a little bit behind. That's our hope. Where stigma is getting a lot better is with the younger people, with the younger kids. The idea of the buddy bench, I don't know if you've heard about that. They have buddy benches.
No, I haven't.
It's a bench that are in schools now where it was designed as a place that a kid could go who felt lonely, and the idea is you see a kid on the bench and you go over and and kind of a place to have kids feel less alone. And so this idea that kids are becoming more sensitive to each other, I think is a huge nice thing to say. I have a son who has become very sensitive and attuned to the kids, and they start to notice this one struggles with this and this one struggles with that. It used to be, like you said, when we were kids and being pulled out of a class to have to get extra help was looked at a lot differently.
Yes. Yes. That's for sure. Oh, Tammy, I could hug you right now for just mentioning those two topics, because the workplace, I've done many interviews with people about how really mental health needs to be addressed in the workplace, how CEOs and management set the example, set the role model, and especially I feel like with grieving, when someone comes back to work and they lost a spouse or their parent or child, whoever they lost, and they're not going to be jumping right back in like they were before. It might take a period of adjustment. And, how does the workplace address that without judging that person? And I had to share a story with you. When I was caregiving for my husband, and I was extremely stressed out, working 40 hours a week, running the home, caregiving then to two people, my son who has a cognitive disability, and Matt, my husband, had early onset Alzheimer's. And I didn't realize I was snapping at the children. Like I was just on the verge, of a breakdown, I think, because I thought I had to be the strong person. And I got my hours cut down. I sort of wasn't happy about that, but I'm glad. And I went for counseling, and people noticed the change in me. And, I highly recommend counseling. And, sometimes we don't realize our behavior until someone, points it out to us. And then, Tammy, I'll tell you what just drives me bonkers, for lack of a better word, is I can't stand it when people tell others, be strong. I just want to, I don't advocate violence, folks, but that sometimes I just want to just slap them upside the head when they say, be strong, or snap out of it, because we don't have to be strong. And when people think, especially people my age and older, and especially men, nothing against men, I love you guys, but, men my age and in my era growing up, we were taught crying is a weakness, showing your emotions is a weakness. You're weak if you go for help, even as a female. And it's not. And it takes years to undo that. And I'm so glad that children are being more sensitive and aware, of their feelings and helping each other, and that there's resources now, which is one reason why I do my show, is to provide resources, for people that I wish I had or that I wish I knew about. when I was
Absolutely.
caregiving or growing up. Excuse me. And I think it's so important, and I see this a lot, Tammy, in caregiving groups, where people think, oh, I have to be strong. I can't cry. I can't do that. And they don't realize it's just harming themselves. Can you address that a little bit?
Sure. Sure, and I just, for a second, if it's okay, I want to just piggyback a little bit off of what you had said about grief, because another area that people struggle with grief in that's not as often talked about is their pets. In your intro, when you said that I have some training in grief counseling, a lot of people have a very hard time when they lose a pet, a dog, a cat, a parrot, one of these pets that they have grown very close to. And that's another time where people feel hesitant to tell others, like, I'm really struggling because my cat died, my dog died. And oftentimes that loss is even harder for a lot of folks than the death of people, because we're talking about mental health, we're talking about stigma. People feel more comfortable hugging their animals sometimes than people. So I just wanted to throw that out there as part of the grief training world, that if people are mentioning that they are worried about their pets, and a lot of folks who are parents can sometimes also have some thoughts about when someone says they call their pets their children, and like, oh, those aren't your kids, you don't know, you don't have kids. That's something else to become more aware of, is we can say a lot of things from our own experience. We don't know often the real reasons why people don't have children, why they do consider their pets as children, whether they were suffering with issues pertaining to fertility or finance. It's just a reminder that, we can be so much more supportive of each other if we come to others from a place of more like curiosity and compassion rather than that judgment. So I just wanted to add that there about grief.
Oh, I love you, Tammy. Thank you. That is really so important. I mean, I never had a pet, except for, I think, a couple of days, and we had to get rid of the dog because mother was allergic to it. So I don't understand that loss, just like I don't understand the loss of a child, and I hope I never do. But just to be compassionate and just don't say to people, I know how you feel, because you do not know how they feel, especially if you didn't have that type of loss. And even if you did, everyone's different. But just to say, I'm here for you, and hold space for them. And just let them cry. Let them talk to you. And just give them a hug. Just say, I'm here for you. And I wish more people would realize that, Tammy.
And, as we're talking about this, it's not that hard, but I guess maybe it is, right? Some of the things that just seem like they'd be common sense, but what they say sometimes about common sense. But really, not to be judgmental seems to be a real challenge for a lot of people. But if someone is opening up to you or just talking to you about how they feel, most of the time they don't want advice. They don't want you to try to talk them out of anything. They just really want to be heard. People want to be seen. And
yes.
I think if we can just carve out a little bit more room for that, we'd already be accomplishing so much more.
Oh, I agree. I used to say you can't fix our grief, and we're not asking to be fixed. And a lot of people think, oh, no, don't cry, or they want to fix you. It can't be fixed. The person's gone, and, it's the acceptance. And I'll tell you, Tammy, and my husband died in 2020, and it took me 5 years to be able to enjoy holidays again, because Matt was dying during the holiday time between Thanksgiving and New Year's. He died on New Year's Day, 2020. And it took me a long time to enjoy holiday music and holidays. And I used to think, and that's why I saw grief therapy, what is wrong with me? Why am I still feeling like this? I shouldn't feel like this. And I've come to find out that it's okay to feel the way that I do, and I'm going to feel the way that I do. And just to accept that and to acknowledge it, it helps me 100% to let me go forward. I just had to share that.
There is I'm so glad you did. There is no wrong way to go through the grief process. You know, we have it in our heads, like you said, that I should be over this by now. What's wrong with me? Grief comes, and part of it is just accepting when it does come, like waves on the ocean.
Yes.
They're going to come and they're going to go. And some waves are really big, and when they hit, you feel like, you know, you're being held under. And some waves, you know, by the beach, they just come, they barely tickle your feet. They just come and they go. And so we basically learn to surf through life. I know it can sound a little simplistic, but sometimes the simple, concrete images are a way to really understand more complicated thoughts and ideas. But if we just imagine feelings, and grief is a certain kind of feeling, that it comes and it goes. And that way, when it does come, we're a little bit more prepared for it. You know, the first time you take a kid, right, to the ocean and you introduce a kid to it, it's like, wow, what is this thing? It's big, it's scary, it's water, some kids are excited, some kids are afraid. But once we get used to something, we know a little bit more what to expect, and I think sometimes that does help make it a little bit easier. That's where education and awareness come in. And along those lines, I like to sometimes think about mental health like preventative health. You know, if you go to a dentist and you keep your appointments, you know, for your cleanings, you get the thing every 6 months you're supposed to go. The dentist gets to check your teeth. And not all the time, but a lot of the times, especially if you have a good relationship with your dentist, and dental care and insurance is a whole other topic for another podcast. And access to medical care. But if we're going to use the idea of the dentist, you know, when they look in your mouth, they can sometimes see the problem areas, and they keep an eye on it. And sometimes preventative care, that's the way you can try to prevent a root canal. So I like to look at mental health as also, it's popular to talk about wellness now. If we're doing things on a regular basis to take care of ourselves, which goes along with getting enough rest and proper diet, enough exercise, it's kind of like those wellness checkups. A lot of the times we can prevent something bigger from happening. And having a therapist is somebody that you can see that gets to know you the same way, you know, a dentist or a doctor gets to know certain parts of the mouth or the body that's hurting. They can help you start to see patterns, start to see those problem areas. Let's keep an eye on that. You know, come back next week and we'll make sure that we're taking care of things as they go. And I
Absolutely.
like when I talk to people, they really kind of resonate with the whole idea of wellness things and checkups. So another way to try to decrease the stigma.
Yes. And, you know, back in my youth, it seemed like yesterday, people, you know, you didn't talk about mental health. You didn't talk about your feelings. You know, it was kind of like suck it up. Was the attitude at that time. And people, and I've been a mental health advocate, Tammy, since I was a teenager. So, you know, like over 50 years. People think, oh, someone is weak because they go for help. And quite opposite. It's a strong person, in my opinion, that goes for help, especially when they are getting gaslit and shamed for going. It takes a strong person to still go for help when they're being attacked in their family environment like I was. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to talk about my past. And I talk about it because maybe it will help inspire someone else to go for help, to seek support. I think as parents, and you could touch on this, Tammy, if you see your child depressed, please don't think it's just a phase and it's going to go away. If your child comes to you and says, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I need support, please take them. I beg you to take them. Because when your child comes to you for help and you ignore it, and you ignore them, they're going to go seek help from other places that you may not want them to seek help from.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd like your advice on that, Tammy. It's like for parents, what should they look for? I guess it depends on the age of the child. Of course, when they're 18, they're an adult. That's when you should get them the therapy before they're 18. Excuse me. Because the therapist doesn't have to tell the parent what's going on when they're 18.
Yeah, there's so many ways to approach therapy with kids now, and it seems like every day there's even more ideas and suggestions. So I can definitely touch on a few of those areas. But first of all, I've had my son in therapy since he was 7, more along the lines of preventative care. He really didn't need the help when I got him into therapy, but I knew that as he got older and started to become a teenager, he would benefit from having somebody to talk to, and by that point, the relationship would already be in place. So he is with the same person he started with when he was younger. And I've always liked that idea, because who is not going to be able to benefit from having a trusting adult? Being an adolescent is a really difficult time. But I understand most parents aren't going to approach mental health quite like that. I was a therapist in my own therapy that wanted my own child to be in therapy. But for those who are just wondering, does my kid need to see a therapist? Would my teenager benefit from it? So the question, of course, is, does the child need it? It depends. Some kids really want therapy. Believe it or not, it has become somewhat of a status symbol a little bit in the college group especially. I've had quite a few college students that have logged on for virtual sessions, and they're in a dorm room, and they actually all have their therapists, and they kind of sign out their dorm room like, tonight I have my therapy, tomorrow you have your therapy. And I am tickled in such a pleasant way that this is so open with these college kids that, they have to kind of fight for the privacy to have their telehealth therapy sessions. So with the college group, there's a lot of information on college campuses, so a lot of times that's the first entry for a college student, is they're struggling on campus, and, the college campuses have mental health centers. So that's an easy way for a college student to get pretty quick kind of help, and then they can find additional resources, because usually the college counseling only offers a few sessions, and then they'll either help or the families would try to find a therapist that can continue, especially if somebody is on campus and then going home during breaks or over the summer. So schools now have a lot more therapists in the building than they ever have before. And it used to just be that you had, one school psychologist, one school social worker. But here in New Jersey, thanks to the mental health agencies, particularly ones like Care Plus New Jersey, they have helped spearheaded where they're sending a lot of licensed clinical social workers into the schools to do extra counseling, because the schools need more and more help. So there's a lot of mental health agencies now that are on-site in the schools, and they're also providing resources to the students and the parents, in the form of information about mindfulness practices, including yoga, deep breathing. So these are all great additional resources now for the schools. These are the public schools, middle schools, elementary schools, and high schools. So a lot of people come into mental health through the schools. Now, if you're a young child and your family is having a crisis, there's Perform Care in New Jersey is the fastest way. You call, if you go on the number for Perform Care for Children's Crisis, you'll get immediate help that comes to the home. So that's a way to get services in place quicker. Now, others who are just trying to find, a private mental health therapist, that's where things get a little trickier, because it depends on, are you looking to see somebody in an office? Are you looking to see somebody virtually? Does your child or teenager also need medication? So in that case, will they need a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner that prescribes medicine in addition to the traditional kind of talk therapy? And that's where, a lot of these conversations are happening about where to go, and, so-and-so has a waiting list, or they don't take my insurance. And these are all the kind of struggles that I'm hearing from, because it makes a big difference where you're going for help, depending if you're going to private pay, meaning you're just going to pay for the sessions, out of pocket, or are you trying to find a therapist or a group practice that's in network with your insurance? So you see how complicated it gets? We talked about stigma-free, and we talk about promoting, access to mental health services, but then it comes down to, okay, I recognize I or myself, my child, my loved one needs help. Now where do I go to get that help? And that we need to have more information and education about.
I agree. No, it's true, and I know for a fact that during COVID, there were waiting lists to be seen by someone because people were having crisis after crisis. There was a lot going on during COVID, which is why, I'm grateful for COVID for one thing. It brought mental health to the forefront, and you had celebrities and sports figures saying, hey, I get depressed too. I even heard on, I think it was 101.5, they had a town meeting of mental health. And I'm like, hallelujah. But why did it have to take COVID? It should have always been that way. It should have, to me, Tammy, always been accepted and to be that way. And, with insurance, I have Medicare and a supplement, and I'm thankful that Medicare covers mental health. And it's important to get the help that you need. I know that in my town, I'm in New Jersey. I live in Woodbridge Township. In Woodbridge Township, the senior center, they offer free counseling.
Oh, wow.
So that's one way, people, or they did a few years ago, I'm pretty sure they probably still do, check with your senior center where you live and see if they offer free counseling. I couldn't believe it that they did, but I needed something. I needed someone with more time and more intense training. So I went back to the psychologist that I saw when I was caregiving for Matt. And I'm, doing much better. But it's really, combination. Excuse me, thank you. A combination. I've had some terrific guests in the mental health field who wrote books that I've read, which helped me a lot. So you see, folks, I have resources on, not just to help you, but to help me. Because, if I need the help, I know other people need help. And, during COVID, there was just so much going on, and you hear about, the healthcare workers, the crisis they had, the doctors having some kind of post-traumatic afterwards from all the death that they saw. Even caregivers, and it's now being recognized finally, as caregiver post-traumatic, finally being recognized. I had talked about that, years ago, and I was told, there's no such thing. Well, there is, and caregivers have it. I know I do. And it's just, the service people have some kind of post-traumatic. And someone told me a quote, and I don't remember who it was, that not all wounds are visible, and some are invisible. Excuse me. And, we can't see inside somebody's mind. And that is why I always say, Tammy, be kind and have respect and treat people with respect and dignity. That's what everybody wants. That's what everyone deserves, and that's what everyone should have. And I think, we need to see more of that. And I hope that insurance does cover mental health. I know even when I had New Jersey Health, it did cover mental health. So that what was good to know. Always check, folks, with your insurance to see, who's in your area, because there's 50 states and in other countries. So always check in your area. I also have a story to share with you, Tammy. I know you'd appreciate this. Folks, here's my story. Don't judge people who go for support, because you never know when you may need it. And I'm going to tell you a story. I've said this before. My sister made fun of me, called me all kinds of names for going for therapy. A few years later, she went for therapy. So, I personally, I don't take medication, but if somebody needs to take medication, don't judge them or make fun of them for that. We do what we have to do to get through a hump in our life. And I always say, you don't know what life is going to throw at you, that you might find yourself needing a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, social worker, whoever you might need to help support you during a rough time. So don't judge others, because you can end up needing therapy yourself. And how would you want to be treated? Would you want someone stigmatizing you, calling you names? And I get on my soapbox, but I digress. But I had to share that story.
I'm so glad you did. And a true shout out to all the caregivers, because it's really rough and hard to take care of somebody else. And in the midst of caring for somebody else, of course, your person's going to have feelings. They're going to have a whole range of feelings. And sometimes it's really hard when a caregiver suffers from guilt, because a lot of the times they'll get frustrated, they'll get tired, they'll want a break. They may even say things or have thoughts about the person they're taking care of that, make them uncomfortable. And that's a huge area where people struggle. And even them trying to find help, I've heard from people who are caregivers, I don't even have time to go see a therapist because I have nobody to watch the person that I'm caregiving for. So this is an area, again, where now that we have more access to virtual therapy, that can be helpful. But a reminder to everyone who's, thinking about virtual therapy, having privacy is a huge component of that. So if you're not comfortable talking to a therapist in a place where you have other people around, especially if you might want to be talking about the person that's there, I've done a lot of
True.
therapy in cars since COVID. A lot of therapy in cars, and I mean, you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are in their cars doing work from cars. Moms cry from cars.
Yes.
So cars have become kind of a place of refuge. But that's the one caveat I put out there, because the access to the virtual care is fabulous, but only when there's privacy, because we also want to keep people safe. And the last thing I'd want as a therapist is for somebody to talk about someone to me, and then they find out that person was in the next room and heard everything they said. So we always want to keep safety in mind too. That therapy is a sacred place. I went into this work to help people and to provide that compassionate professional care, but that's also reminding people to be safe and to also have a space where they can feel like their needs are heard. And the caregivers, it's such important work, and we don't value it enough all the time. And I think it is something you don't really appreciate or think much about until you find yourself in that situation, and then it's like, wow. And along the lines also of what you were talking about with the seniors is, I should have mentioned that before, so thanks for the reminder, is
Sure.
Seniors with mental health is a huge area still with stigma, because like we were talking about at the very beginning, back in the day, we didn't talk about mental health. So out of all the people now, the seniors sometimes are the ones that will struggle the most, because they still believe that they shouldn't, have to see a therapist. That's back
Absolutely.
in the day when we couldn't even say cancer. Cancer was the C word. So, to them, therapy is, even worse than that. So I know that there's a lot of senior centers that are doing a lot more work with education and talking about the importance of getting help. And a lot of seniors especially struggle, if they feel alone, or they're struggling with financial stressors, or the people around them, they don't have people that are living nearby. There's a whole bunch of issues that seniors face that are unique to them and their age group. So we just want to put it out there.
Absolutely. I actually have a story related to that, Tammy. My brother died in 2021, my older brother, and my mom was, I think, 90 at the time, or 91. And I suggested to my mom for grief counseling. It was the first time in her life she was alone, ever lived alone. And my mother bit my head off. She goes, I don't need to tell anyone my feelings. It's no one's business. I don't air my dirty laundry.
Yep.
I keep it to myself. That is someone from the World War II time, folks. They just will not, open up. And I felt so bad for my mom, Tammy, because I know she was struggling, and yet she thought it was horrible to go for help and to acknowledge her feelings and to talk about it, that she considered that airing her dirty laundry, even then. And I think that's a very strong concept that people in their 80s and 90s have. If they go to a therapist, they're airing the dirty laundry, and you're not. You need support. And I just felt bad that she suffered inside when she didn't have to.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, very common with that age group. What do they call the silent? I think they're called the silent ones. They grew up in the 30s and 40s, and they had to be silent because the war was going on. Excuse me. And it's really a shame. I think my mom and I butted heads because, I mean, even though I'm shy, I was an advocate. I would stand up for myself and other people, where my mom was like, Betsy, be quiet, don't make waves. If there was a problem when my dad was in a nursing home, I said, you want me to say something? No, I don't want to make trouble. And now me, I will cause a tsunami, Tammy. I don't care. I will open my big mouth, and I did. But, it's really, I just want to urge everyone out there, no matter how old you are, if you're struggling, please seek support. You don't have to keep it to yourself. And I think a lot of people don't realize, and caregivers especially, the mortality rate among caregivers is very high. And the older you are, the higher the mortality rate because of the stress. So I want to encourage caregivers, seek support wherever you are in this world. You can't handle this alone. You don't have to handle it alone. And that's why, we're here. That's just why I do my show. I want people to know about resources. Everyone thinks they're alone in how they feel, and you're not. There's other people who have the same struggles. They just won't talk about it. And that's why I believe in sharing our experiences and our stories to help other people.
Betsy, you're amazing.
Oh, thank you. What kind of therapy do you do in your practice, Tammy? Excuse me.
Yeah, so I see adults, adolescents, and couples. For therapy, I have training, like I said before, in grief. I help people with depression, anxiety, caregiving, the aging process, divorce, finding yourself, all the reasons that people would seek counseling for. And I do have a training in trauma. And so, I always tell people when they're looking for a therapist that it's kind of like finding a pair of jeans. There's a lot of styles out there. There's a lot of trainings and certifications and fancy letters that people can have after their name, but it's got to feel like the right fit. And sometimes, I've heard from people like, oh, I want to find a therapist that does that, and they find that therapist, but then they meet the person and they're like, I don't know. It's kind of like those jeans, they're too tight or they're not the right denim. You want the washed kind with the ripped holes. So, there's somebody out there for you, and it's a matter sometimes of shopping around. And actually, some people will shop for jeans with more care than they'll shop for a therapist. So,
yes.
You do want to kind of feel like the person that you're with is going to be a person that you feel respects you, understands you, is listening to you.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes, it takes trying a couple, maybe even like 3 or 4 or a few until you find that right therapist. But when you do, it's like hitting a pot of gold. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. It really is. And I know I've tried several until I found someone. As a matter of fact, I said, I tried a women's therapist, and I didn't care for the ones that I had met. And I said, well, let me try a male therapist, see how they are. And and I really like the person that I see. And, it's just that, like anything else, trial and error. But I am grateful, Tammy, for you for coming on the show and spending time with me, and for the work that you do to help other people. It is just so important. And I didn't even, touch about, young people and people of all ages and how the suicide rate is up. But I really would love to have you come back on my show. There's so many areas of mental health to discuss. I think September is Suicide Prevention Month.
It is.
So
it is. And
yes.
You're right. There's so much to talk about with mental health, and of course, it's my passion. So I could go on for hours. But it's a topic that is so important, and with all the things that we've touched upon is just hitting the tip of the iceberg. Each area could have its own show, and then show after that. So. This is kind of an overview for, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, to try to, kind of give an idea of all the ideas out there, but it's a topic well worth delving more into. So thank you for your passion. Thank you for your commitment to caregiving, to advocating, to being the kind of person you are who wants to make other people feel heard and respected and loved. I hear a lot of love from you, a lot of care. So kudos to you and for the amazing work you do.
Oh, thank you so much, Tammy. I'm getting getting emotional over here. Verklempt. Thank you so much for your kind words. Where can people contact you for your counseling services that live in New Jersey?
Sure. My name is Tammy Smith, and my practice is TM Smith Counseling, and I'm located in Teaneck on Cedar Lane across from Holy Name Hospital. So you can reach out to me there. My website is tmsmithcounseling.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I've gotten hip with having all my social media handles. So like to grow with the times and join the virtual world that's out there. As a therapist, I started just like most other therapists in office, but as you mentioned, COVID helped us expand into the telemedicine world, which has given us so much more opportunity for growth. And we're still learning as we go along, and it's definitely advantageous for people, especially those who don't have access to transportation or who are caregivers and need to do therapy from the home. And also, just to throw out there, hybrid is there. So I do have some people that alternate between coming in person and doing telehealth. If the car has a flat tire, they no longer have to cancel. Oh, they just let me know we're going to do virtual today, and we log on. So, that's another added bonus. So now we have for options for therapy in person in the office, exclusively telehealth, and hybrid. So exciting times.
Yes, it is, and I'm thankful for virtual. My psychologist does virtual. He did during COVID, and he continued, and I don't blame him. Hey, you save on rent. That's a big expense that people save on when they don't have an office, if that's what they choose to do. Plus, he's older, so I understand that. Well, thank you so much, Tammy Smith, for coming on today. I'd like to have you on again. Folks, all the information about Tammy Smith will be in the blog that Jeannie White, who's the station manager, writes and produces the show. I would definitely encourage, if you are in New Jersey and you're looking for someone, check out Tammy Smith. Go on her website. Look at her social pages. And, see if Tammy will be a fit. And I also want to encourage caregivers. Caregivers, if you're hearing this and you're in New Jersey, you can't do it on your own. It's okay to go for help. It's okay to struggle. I needed counseling midway in Matt's journey because I thought I had to be Superwoman. And you don't have to be Superwoman. You don't have to be Superman or whatever your gender is or however you identify. It's okay to say, I need support, and to talk to someone. And if you're grieving and you need support, that's okay too. Grieving is forever. It just changes. But it's with you forever. And we'll always love and miss our loved ones. Don't let anyone tell you anything different. Love does not end. It continues on. And I also want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Pastoral Talk Radio, that makes this possible. I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you for listening, subscribing. And if you don't already do so, Chatting with Betsy is for free on iHeart, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Spreaker, to name just a few. And you can follow me on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And as I always say at the end of my show, before I say that, I want to thank Andrea Pass for arranging this interview. Andrea Pass is owner of Andrea Pass Public Relations. So thank you, Andrea. So glad I had the opportunity to talk to Tammy Smith. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. Until we chat again, this is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.